Now, my name is Bud Frimoth. To be correct, it would be the Reverend Mr. Elmer Richard Frimoth, Jr.
We're going to be talking some about your time in the service in World War II. When did you enter the service?
1940s and 44 when I was drafted. I didn't volunteer. I was drafted. Yeah. And that was a common thing at that time. I got my paper from Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Congratulations, welcome. You have been.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Yeah. To answer.
Lucky you.
I was drafted, and I went through basic training in Fort Sill, Oklahoma, in artillery, and what I ultimately ended up being, I strung the wire. We didn't have radio contacts. It was all wire. And so my job, when I got overseas, was to be a wireman. I was with a unit that was, when I joined it, I didn't realize it, but I later found out it was the 255th Field Artillery Battalion, 3rd Army, 12th Corps Artillery. They were called the Suicide Battalion because I was a replacement for the Battle of the Bulge, one of the worst, horrendous battles in World War II in Central Europe, and in France and Germany areas. An awful lot of people lost their lives, and I was a replacement for those who were lost. It was interesting. I came in at the back end of the war. My first involvement in combat was probably in February. The war in Germany ended in April. So it was just a 3-month period, but I saw enough of what happened. One of the tragedies of war is what happens that's not meant to happen. A plane was strafing us. We were up on a little bit of a hill. The plane was strafing us. There was a unit down below. Our unit was up there, and there was a fellow who had a machine gun was following this plane, and the people down below followed the plane and ripped through his body. He was one of those who was killed by friendly fire, just because of where he was. Well, this is the thing that happens time and again in war. That it's hard. It's hard. I mean, we've heard of it in every war. We're not meant to kill each other. I mean, I'm deeply committed to that. I remember going through Nuremberg, which was just flattened. Our bombers had been there. And going through Nuremberg, something occurred that I have never forgotten and never have experienced again, and that's the smell of war. Now, I can't tell you what that is. I mean, the smell of destruction of stuff, it's like when you knock down a building, all this kind of stuff. There's a smell of death. But there's another smell that I've never been able to pinpoint, and that still haunts me to this day. I've not spent a lot of time thinking about it. But, here I'm 18 years old. Just think, a couple of years and point to who you are. And these are, threatening, your life is threatened, and all this is going on.
Being part of the occupying force, what was your experience with German civilians?
For the most part, there was tension. You knew it. You tried to live with it, but in the process, one of the things that we learned, I learned 2 phrases in German. Haben Sie Eier? Do you have any eggs? Because all we had was dried eggs and dried milk.
No.
That's all. And the food during combat was anything but you loved the K rations and then the C rations, which was the worst. They kept you alive, but you sometimes wondered about it. But I learned and V Gates, how are you? That's about all I remember. And shortly after things got sort of cleaned up, I remember we were taken to Dachau, which was a death camp, and to hold in your hand disc, which represented the ashes of one who was cremated. And all it had was a number on it. It's those kinds of things. I haven't thought about that for a long time, but it affects who you are and who you become.
When you returned home, I don't know how long were you overseas?
I was overseas a year and a half.
A year and a half. When
Yeah.
you returned home, you mentioned to me earlier that your mom said that you were changed.
Yeah.
Like how was that readjustment period, and how did you manage to handle that?
I was part of the church, and I talked to some of the pastor there. I did a lot of reflection. I did some writing. And of course, I think that became part of what my lifestyle became ultimately. But I think I just did what I think most of the guys my age did. We just sucked it up and lived with what we had.
I have a friend who just came home from his first tour of duty in Afghanistan, and he is so altered.
Yeah.
He was always very reserved and very shy, but there's just a joy there, you know, all the time, no matter what. And I feel like that's just been not extinguished, but subdued. Yeah.
Right. And how long can you keep that down before it's going to explode? We've got to find the longhouse.
Yeah.
No, that was the same thing for the man that I knew that was in Vietnam. No, everyone who knew him just said that he was completely altered.
Yeah.
Just completely different.
How can't you be? And that's a horrible thing for people just a little older than you two to live with for the rest of their lives. And I think of what these young kids, is all I can think of, are going through. And when they come back home, and you wonder, why are they on the streets? So it's there.
Yeah.
But to acknowledge it's still there, I can still move on. And I can put up a wall, not to hide it, but to say, I have encased it. I haven't buried it. It's still there, but there's more for my life.
Right. You're more than that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Your tears are real. Thank you for them. Thank you, because they're in my heart too. And I just feel for these young people coming back in 2 and 3 and 4 times. I just cannot imagine. I cannot imagine. We've tried to make a difference and came back. And yet there are those young bucks who still think, we've got to have this, we've got to take this, we've got to take that. Instead of learning how to live together. When we learn to live together, just what you're doing here, trying to understand. History does teach us.
Oh, yeah.
It does. But do we learn?
Sometimes.
Yeah. Right. But it's still this way instead of this way. We're still thinking in terms of I'm better than you. Yeah. And of course that's part of competition, but it doesn't need to be competitive in terms of.
There's a difference between the Olympics and World War.
That's right. You're absolutely right. Yeah. Big difference. That's where the field needs to be. I loved what Senator Mark Hatfield, who I hold up, and I just loved the man. He said, what we really need to do is at war, is to get together people in their 60s, these men in their 60s, and fight the wars. He'd say we do it over beer and tea and coffee. That's where we would fight it. And because this is so true, take the young, and that's of any nation, destroy a generation.
Yeah.
I think of all the guys that were of my generation who didn't come back. Those children were never born. Those grandchildren were never there. Those teachers, those communicators, all those kind of people. Same thing with everyone.